When you see those trends happening, it's just super important to dive in. And if you can be one of the early people in it, you really have the opportunity to uptick your career. Productivity is not enough. If you look at how most people justified AI last year, it was, I can save every employee 2 or 3 hours. We can do that too, right? Like that's not really a win for the CIO. What they care about is having an impact on the business itself. That self-sufficiency dimension is like super liberating for people. It gives you a superpower that you just never had before. You're very much taking the opposite approach, which is to say, what if we put awesome AI tools in the hands of everyone in the company and get everybody to think about the work they do and how they can start to automate their work so they can focus on more valuable things. As the cost drives down, people think and come up with new ways to use the technology more and drive, better outcomes for it.
Welcome back to Get the Check. Today we have Matt Kixmoeller, who is the CMO of Glean. Previously, he was at both Ghost and Pure Storage, and he started his education back at MIT, doing a degree in chemical engineering. Glean is a work AI platform, so they solve both the enterprise search problem as well as launch recently AI agents. But first, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your undergrad education. You did this in chemical engineering. And so I wanted to ask, how do you go from something like that to AI?
Yeah, so long ago. When I entered college, I really had no idea what the heck I wanted to do. So I somewhat randomly picked chemical engineering. And I guess it was my sophomore summer, I got an internship working for Procter & Gamble making mascara. And that got me thinking about what I want to do with my life. And I came to the conclusion that making mascara probably was not it. So I spent the next summer in Wall Street checking out investment banking, didn't love that. So I did what everybody, I guess, does when they don't know what to do. They become a consultant. So I did that for a few years, but that was right around 2000 and the tech gold rush was happening in the Silicon Valley. So I figured I'd better find my way out here. And things kind of worked out after that.
And tell me about what it was like kind of moving across the coast, diving into Silicon Valley.
It was a bit of a funny story because I was out here in Silicon Valley, and then I actually decided to start a company with some buddies from MIT, and basically got on a plane back out to Boston to Logan. And literally, as I was landing at Logan Airport, I checked my voicemail, and the CEO Shashir had called and said, "Good news. We secured funding from Vinod Khosla at Kleiner Perkins at the time.
Oh, wow.
Bad news, he wants us to start the company in California." So I literally turned myself around, flew back to California, and have never left since. We were basically trying to build peer-to-peer management systems for large-scale internet data centers. And so that was when the internet was really scaling, and Vinod and the team and ourselves just had a view that we had to come up with a new architecture. And the company was at it for about 8 years. And it was a great example of a company where there were a ton of smart people that have all gone on to do amazing things in their careers since, but just never quite found product market fit. And so we got some success basically selling to large scale internet operators, but then there was a big telco downturn and it was just a difficult time in the market. So when I bounced out of there, I ended up joining what was called Veritas Software at the time. I was the PM lead for their largest product, backup product called NetBackup. And one day, the CTO had left Veritas and was going to start a new company. I had coffee with him, and I basically at that point had zero inkling that I wanted to do a startup again. But the idea just made so much sense to me. And I went home that night, talked to my wife, and I was like, I can't imagine not doing this. This totally, I can just totally see this company happening. And so I decided to jump into it on pretty much a whim and got to be part of the early team at Pure as a result.
And what was that idea? Can you explain what Pure did?
Yeah, the idea, if you rewind to that period of time, flash storage had just kind of started to become impactful, and it was really coming out in consumer electronics. So Apple had shipped like the iPod and the iPod Nano, a really small device. And so essentially flash was enabling music players, cell phones, et cetera, to be compelling. And everybody's loving these devices. But if you went in a data center, all the data on the internet, all the corporate data was still being stored in these huge refrigerator-sized devices full of big 3.5-inch spinning hard drives. And so the idea was basically, hey, flash is going to take over the world. Consumer electronics are going to basically drive the fab capacity to make flash get cheaper and cheaper. So let's go figure out how to build an enterprise storage product out of flash. And so along the way, what we really realized was the storage industry overall was super ready for disruption. And we just tried to use flash as an excuse to just create a better storage company. And I think that was the big win, just rethinking the entire product of an enterprise storage array from scratch. And like I say, using flash as the excuse to do so. Whenever there's a technology transition like that, it lets new entrants come in. But we really tried to think beyond just that technology change itself.
Yeah, and thinking more like deeply about that, it seems that your career is kind of around these pivotal moments in tech where there's a new trend and you try to latch onto that trend early on. When you're making those choices, how do you distinguish between catching on to just a trendy thing versus something that is truly has potential and delivering value to the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to pick these things, but when you look for things that are fundamentally new technology shifts, usually there's something there that will have value. I mean, if I look at my time, there was the big internet trend. That's when I came out to the Bay Area.
Hmm.
There was virtualization and the rise of VMware and going from physical servers to virtual. There was this flash storage thing. There was the move to the cloud. And whenever any of these things happened, it was pretty obvious that they were going to be big and they were going to really upend the market. Particularly when you see those trends happening, it's just super important to dive in. And if you can be one of the early people in it, you really have the opportunity to uptick your career. When there's a truly new trend like that, it's kind of new to everybody. So, for example, when I was first getting in enterprise tech, Oracle was like the king of enterprise, databases.
Hmm.
And there have been people who have been working on Oracle for 20 years. And so if you sat up that day and said, I'm going to go become an Oracle expert, you're basically fighting people who have been doing this for 20 years, and it's very hard to catch up to their knowledge. Whereas at the time, say, virtualization was big, no one had been doing VMware for more than a year. And so anybody could dive into that. And if they studied hard and if they ran fast at it, you can dive. And so, that's exactly what it feels like right now, of course, with the rise of AI, where we're just a few years into this. I think everybody sees the potential, but it also just feels so early.
And what are the skills do you think that are kind of key to someone who's jumping from different industries? Because you've now done it, I guess, like what, 3 or 4 times throughout your career where you're tacking onto the next industry trend and seeing that large growth. What are the skills that are important to maintain in order to be like the first thinker in those areas?
Yeah, I think you just have to be a sponge, and you just have to be ready to admit that you don't know anything and to learn and to spend a significant amount of time thinking and learning. When AI first came out, people basically looked at it and said, "Awesome, this thing can just make me be faster at what I do. Maybe I can draft an email faster, or it can help me answer a question faster, or whatever." But before long, when you start to really understand it, you realize, wow, AI enables me to do stuff that just wasn't possible before.
Hmm.
Like in my job right now, for example, I love to get customer input. And so how would I get customer input in the past? I might have called a few of my favorite sales reps and asked them like, hey, how are some of your customer interactions going? Maybe you can introduce me to a customer. I can go to that next meeting. And you get these like very singular data points. But now we record all of our sales calls using Gong. And
Hmm.
so I have this treasure trove of literally thousands of recorded sales calls. And you can start to use AI to just ask it questions and analyze that massive unstructured data store. And
Hmm.
so it changes how you think about being a product person to be able to use all this signal to come to your decisions.
Well, that's a great transition also into just Glean in general and what Glean does. So just to recap, Glean is a work AI platform and can synthesize data from your enterprise data, essentially, like whatever you have. In your most recent launch, you guys launched agents. And something that I'm actually really curious about is at work, there's kind of low room for error. You want to make sure you're not making mistakes. So how do you really get people to transition to using agents? Because in the previous AI applications loops, there's always like human in the loops. You're always asking a question, getting an answer, like applying changes, things like that. But with agents, you kind of have to trust the AI to go and execute this action on behalf. So are you guys seeing that apprehensiveness from your customers, or how do you guys think about solving problems like that?
Yeah, well, let me start at maybe just a little bit of the very beginning in the sense that one of the biggest challenges with getting any AI technology, agents, or anything to be useful at work is it has to understand the data at work. And so, the first kind of inception moment for Glean was exactly that. So much is happening with all these new AI tools and AI models. They're at first generated or geared mostly towards consumer use. They're trained on the data on the internet.
Hmm.
But when I'm at work, I care a lot about the data of work, the data at work, the people at work. And so this was really the inception moment for Glean was, hey, what if we create a massive index of all the data at work, do so in a permission sensitive way, and then connect that to the best AI tools so you can use AI at work, but have it be grounded in the context of the actual knowledge and data of work. So that was really the first thing. As you said, we've now kind of evolved to these, from not just kind of searching and finding information, asking questions, things of that nature, to now allowing people to build agents so they can do useful work at work and start to replace processes that maybe humans would have done, or allow every employee to have a team of agents that kind of works with them to magnify their productivity. And I think you're dead on that we're kind of like right at this zone right now where the capability of agents is just getting better and better and better, but they're not perfect, right? And so what we see right now is some of the use cases where people are using them are ones where basically a little of that can be tolerated, right? And so things that are super deterministic in nature and you're expecting exactly that perfect answer or that 1 or 0 may not be the right first use case. And then, we're just starting to build the tools and the agent building frameworks to be able to describe what good output looks like, to be able to test it, And so, we're just starting to see these platforms add the capabilities for observability, for essentially QA of agents. How do I describe what a good output is? How do I test if I'm achieving that? How do I know that it's achieving it on a consistent basis? And how do I get warned if I'm starting to see deviation from that? So
And,
all these are primitives that are coming in the agent platforms.
and I'm curious, what are the specific use cases that you're seeing the most of agents right now?
Yeah, so part of what makes Glean's strategy unique is we are very much focused on helping everybody in the organization take advantage of AI and build agents. And so we see everything from very personal use case agents all the way through to various departments and use cases within. There's a tons of use cases in the sales department, and if you think about what a salesperson has to do, they're often expected to be an amazing treasure trove of knowledge on everything because they meet with customers and customers expect them to have all the answers, to fix all the problems, to be the interface to the company. And so that's a pretty high burden for a sales rep. And so, we've built agents that do everything from, say, a meeting preparation where I'm going in to meet with this customer. How do I go and look at the outside world and understand what this customer is up to? Are there news that pertains to them? Are there things I should know about them? And then also the inside world. What's up with their feature requests? Do they have support questions that are open? Do we have a deal that's happening right now? There's this kind of 360 view of a potential customer for a meeting. It's something that sales reps spend just a ton of time on because not only do they have their own meetings, but they have meetings with executives and they meet lots of people. And so, automating that process is super valuable. There's also a lot of value and a lot of focus right now on kind of automating the BDR, SDR process. So, this is kind of like the cold outbounding. Say I'm a phone-based sales rep, and part of my job is to just do many, many, many emails to try to get into a certain account. Well, the way that you get that email to have a higher % chance of opening is to have it be more personalized, to have context, to say something interesting and not be super generic. And so again, an AI agent is a perfect thing to understand the person that the email is being sent to, understand the company they work for, understand the industry they're part of, but also just be able to make a hypothesis. Like, because I know who this person is, what industry they're in, I kind of know how our product might help them. That kind of explains the value from the first moment. It's a good example also of kind of the changing expectation of these solutions. So, I feel like last year in many AI type solutions, the big focus was all productivity. Can I save somebody time? Can I, help them, shave a few hours off their day or their week or whatever, right? But this is a good example of like, okay, yes, I can save time of that ISR so they can send more emails. But what they really care about is open rate because they want responses.
Okay.
So, they'll work harder if they have to, but what they really want is that email to be good. And I've kind of seen in that use case this shift happen where people are realizing that not only can we make maybe an ISR more productive, but we can actually help them send a better email to start with and improve their open rate, and thus improve the success of the eventual transition from that to a meeting and conversion.
So that's a shift on how kind of Glean looks at its product too, because I imagine you guys started as like a very productivity-based tool since you started in search, and now that you're moving to agents, it's like not just you would think productivity is like the first step, but it's almost like there's room for like better accuracy over humans as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things about Glean is that it starts with a use case that everybody knows how to do, which is search and find information. So when we get deployed in a customer, we'll typically be deployed very broadly. So think 5, 10, 20,000 employees all get Glean right on their browser, their desktop, whatever, right? And the first thing that people can discover they can do with it is just find information, search. Google taught them how to search 30 years ago, not a problem. We don't have to educate people on that. And then they start to realize, okay, they don't just have the ability to search for stuff. They can start asking questions. They can ask analysis questions. They can analyze data they didn't know existed. They can use it to draft content. They can, use it to research hypotheses using the real data within a company. And so they just start to kind of walk along this AI journey. And agents just become like a piece of that. They start to realize, I have this thing I used to do that was fairly manual. Maybe now I can go train an agent to, replace that piece of my job.
That's really interesting. Like something that I'm also thinking about when I'm listening to these like different use cases is that it seems that Glean has the power to basically make an agent in any type of vertical. So that becomes like in sales, like what you're talking about, and kind of competing with the agents that could come out of CRMs, but then also potentially agents, like for example, in like the coding environment or the security environment. Do you see Glean as like almost a competitor to all of these different like software verticals and being able to like horizontally compete, if that makes sense?
You nailed it. The term we use is that we are the horizontal platform. And I think part of our belief or realization is that, when you think about trying to automate the business processes within a company, who does these processes? Who knows about these processes? It's the people, right? And if you look at the last wave of trying to do business automation, there was this market called the RPA market, the robotic process automation market, and largely kind of died. And it died because it was a very top-down developer-centric approach where you would have RPA engineers go and kind of go department by department and try to build these processes, automate them. And they were just very fragile, and it was very developer-led. And so maybe you could go after some of the most, important repeatable processes of the company, but it never got to like the groundswell of everyone. And so we are very much taking the opposite approach, which is to say, what if we put awesome AI tools in the hands of everyone in the company and get everybody to think about the work they do and how they can start to automate their work so they can focus on more valuable things. There are other AI companies who might say, look, I'll come in and I'll find that one thing you do as an organization and like help you train a model and do something really powerful with AI. And that's valuable. Most companies want to do that. What we basically say is, like, let's look at your entire workforce. What would be the win if every employee you have could use AI daily to accomplish every task and started to be 20, 40, 60% more productive? And like I said earlier, even forget productivity, just started to work in new ways with AI, started to rethink the processes themselves and capture them and automate them with agents.
I imagine that this also shifts kind of the organization, like the customer that you're selling to, the enterprise you're selling to, like it shifts the employees' kind of mindset at those enterprises because now they're almost self-motivated to become that much more efficient. And I can almost imagine that you create these like internal competitions of like if you're able to get like one employee to gain insane productivity, do you see that kind of disseminate into other employees also adopting the tool? Because like there's almost inherent competition between the employees like becoming better and faster at their job.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most fun things about my job is this is the first time I've worked on a product or marketed a product that I'm a daily user of and that people just love. And so, you'll be walking in the airport with a Glean backpack and someone will stop you and be like, I love it. I couldn't work without it, And so that energy is awesome. And that's exactly kind of what happens when we get deployed. Like we'll get deployed in an organization. People will start using us for the basic stuff like search that they know. But then, power users will emerge and they'll just start sharing. And, one of the things we built into the platform was the ability to save agents, to send them to others to share, and to build essentially an agent and a prompt library within the product itself. In most organizations, there really is a need to overcome fear of technology change. Like some people are early adopters, some people are not. And so, what we tend to find is that most departments have like an operations and software lead. Like I have a marketing operations person. I have a marketing team of 40 people and I have a person dedicated to tools and processes and software to make us more efficient. Sales teams always have sales ops people. Engineering teams have the folks that run the tools and the build infrastructure and all that. And so oftentimes those folks are the ones that are really at the nexus of kind of like people, process, and the tools and how the tools implement process. And they are the perfect people to kind of help curate that.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. And speaking of like integration with customers, what is that like kind of ramp time and how do you really once sell a company, hey, this like we're Glean, we're the best, workplace search and agent platform at this point. So one, like what do you feel like is like your defensible moat when you guys are selling to these customers? And also how do you motivate them to integrate and adopt? Because I imagine that integration time might be a little bit complex, long, given the amount of data that you have to transfer and potentially fine tune on their environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Glean from day one was focused on going after the largest enterprises in the world. And when you do that, there's just a set of things you build into your product from day one around security, around compliance, around permissions. And oftentimes when there's a startup, they might often try to sell to a bigger company and just kind of like ignore that stuff and try to not go talk to the CISO and just try to get adopted and maybe grow, right? Because, I mean, what we do literally, we come to an organization and we connect with every SaaS application and tool, and we index like 100% of the data the company has. So this is super, security sensitive. And so we just try to take that head on and go meet the CISO, go meet obviously the CIO, and just really walk through the difference in a platform built for the enterprise versus something that somebody hacked together based on, some open source tools and whatnot. And I'd say also that we love it when we meet a customer who's already tried to build something like this, because as they get into the build process, they realize that it's pretty easy to like build something as a POC that like kind of works and give some signal that like, hey, there's something exciting here. But like scaling that across an organization, they run into all the problems that make this hard. And, it's hard for all the security stuff we talked about earlier. This becomes a mission critical platform. It has to be up, it has to have reliability. We're at a point now where our largest customers have billions of objects indexed. They have very, 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 very large indices, right? And so just the scale of that, And also just the change rate. If you think about how often in your organization you send a Slack message or get an email or update permissions on a document, people expect that to be real time. And so keeping up with not only the size and scale, but the real time nature of the organization is super challenging.
I want to know a little bit deeper about your integration. I assume you guys are fairly highly integrated because you need to kind of connect all pieces of data. What's the kind of trade-off you make with spending more time on the integration and I'm sure getting a higher quality solution versus spending less time indexing potentially less data? And like, how did you guys arrive to like where you are today and like the way you think about that?
We've really just tried to index towards the needs of the largest enterprises. And what that means is they want to connect to all the systems they care about. And then now, as we're getting into the agentic world, it's not just a index of data connector. We're now doing actions back in the applications themselves. So that means you need to be able to do things like within Salesforce, update the sales record, or file a ticket in Jira, or send an email in Gmail. And
Mhm.
so every application can have dozens of actions that you want the agent to be able to take back in the application, again, in a secure and permission sensitive way. And so, that's an area that keeps growing. And, I think it's also, we aim to have a customer be able to get like 95% of their data pretty much out of the box with the connectors we built. But they always have special homegrown applications, things that are kind of like the long end of it, if you will. And so we have an open API. We'll help connect our product to their custom data sources, and that can be either work the customer does or consulting work we do. But there's always some customization to the deployment for a large customer.
Cool. I wanted to zoom out. There was something that I read in one of your like state of the art blog posts. The quote is enterprise spending on generative AI is projected to now grow by 50% over the next year. And this reflects basically a growing commitment to leveraging AI. However, only 6% of the surveyed companies have yet to see AI provide even 75% of the expected ROI in business growth, and only 39 expect to see true cost savings before the second half of 2025. Basically, what this is talking about is like enterprises risk overspending on AI without gaining a tangible return. There's a couple questions I wanted to kind of dive in. How do you think enterprises balance fast adoption with actually making sure they're getting the correct ROI out of it? And how do you guys also measure ROI for your own customers?
Yeah, great question. So I think this has been a massive shift between last year and this year. So last year, I feel like CIOs were being just measured on activity, like get AI in the business, try
Mhm.
things. And the main order of the day was just we want to go from no AI to some AI. We want to do it safely, but we want to get AI in here because we know it's super strategic to do so. And I want our employees to learn and start to learn how to build stuff. Um, we had an event last year, kind of at the end of the year, where one of our customers, who's a CIO, talked about how every one of his enterprise applications now has an AI product or an AI offering or an AI option. And if he was to subscribe to all of those AI options that were being offered to him in the products he's already deployed, that it would literally increase his overall cost of software for the company by 30%. And so we're now, I think, at the zone where people are starting to say, great, I've played around.
Mhm.
How do I standardize? How do I get some commonality? If I have 6 different groups and they're all experimenting with AI, I don't want them all doing it in different ways. We need a platform-based approach. And so that's a big thing that we focus on is kind of educating customers on how they go from a bunch of initiatives to picking a few strategic tools to standardize on in a horizontal fashion.
Mhm.
And I think from an ROI and productivity perspective, we're really trying to educate folks that productivity is not enough. If you
Mhm.
look at how most people justified AI last year, it was I can save every employee 2 or 3 hours, and we can do that too, right? Like when
Yeah.
we deployed everybody, we've done surveys across our customer base. We'll save every employee 3 to 5 hours a week, and so it's kind of a no-brainer in that way. But that's not really a win for the CIO. If you look at the CIO, what they care about is having an impact on the business itself.
Mhm.
And so what you really need to do is think about each of the departments and say, what are the ways that these departments are measured? So if I'm an engineering organization, what do I care about? I care about the velocity of code. I care about how fast I can ship features. I care about time to market. And then
Mhm.
I care about reliability. And so you need to be able to argue how AI solves that, helps make engineers more productive so they can not just write more code, but actually ship stuff faster at higher quality.
Mhm.
You think about sales, they care about revenue. What does revenue mean? It means how much revenue each sales rep can basically ship. It means how fast a new rep can come up to speed and start to close business. And so that kind of revenue velocity matters a lot. And so I think that's the next wave is being able to make arguments in the language of those top level business outcomes for each department. And that's ultimately how you have to justify ROI for AI solutions.
Cool. And I think we touched on this earlier about Glean being a horizontal platform. Why do you think Glean kind of has an edge over its competitors in the each individual kind of segment? So, for example, like the CRM AI players or even the code AI players, like where do you think Glean sits against all of those individual companies? And do you see criticism of like, hey, you're doing everything but not one thing well? Do you ever see like your customers stack a couple of AI applications in like one department and also use you?
Yeah. Look, I think the first thing I would say is I think we are realistic about the fact that we do not expect our customers to build everything on us.
Yeah.
Just like they never ran their entire business on Salesforce, they also have some other stuff, right?
Hmm.
So, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is really focus on the core value of being connected to the entirety of an organization's data. And there are some agents and there are some workflows where connecting to all that data really has a key benefit to the outcome. So that agent I talked about earlier around like prepare me for a meeting if I'm a salesperson. Well, that's a good example of one where I do want to see the support information, the sales information, the finance information, the outside world information, all that matters, right? And so that's a great example of one where Glean is super valuable. There's other agents where the data all exists within the vertical niche application, and that vendor is in a very good position to not only understand the data, but enact change back in their application and whatnot. And so we absolutely see a world where these things will coexist. One of the things that we think is important, though, is that every one of these applications is going to want context of the overall data.
Yeah.
And it's just not practical for every application to build an index of every other application's data. Like if I'm a customer, I don't want 18 indexes of all my data. It's hard enough to make one big index of all my data.
Hmm.
And so that's a big part of why we have an open API strategy where we basically say, look, you're going to bring us in, we'll index all your data, we'll make it useful via an end user experience with our Glean Assistant where end users can search and find and whatnot. You can build agents on us when it makes sense, great. But we can also just export data to your other agent building platforms. And so if you're going to build an agent on OpenAI or Salesforce or LangChain or you name it, have those talk to us and basically use us as a connector and basically feed data to those agentic systems as well. Totally fine.
And you don't see this as like potential cannibalization to your own end product as well?
I think it's a strategy of openness, right? Like enterprise customers are massively complicated. They're doing a million things.
Yeah.
There's no way any one vendor is going to do everything for them. And no enterprise customer wants to get locked in, right? Like when they pick platforms, they care a lot about the API strategy of those platforms because at the end of the day, it is their data, right? They own their data. They're using a platform like us to be able to make that data useful to AI. But the last thing they want to do is become incumbent to any vendor or beholden, I should say, to any vendor. CIOs have always been pretty smart about not wanting to get locked in because of financial reasons. If you become totally locked into some platform, then that vendor is just going to start charging you. You have no other options or whatever. So whether it would be being multi-cloud or having multiple platforms, that's always been a thought process for them. But this is, I think, one of the first eras where it's not just about kind of financial lock-in, but it's also about access to innovation. And that's why, for example, not only are we a horizontal platform, but we support all the kind of leading LLMs. We want to be able, and we try to fast follow on those when a new model becomes available. Can we make it available? And then, that just gives people choice so they don't feel like they're getting innovation from the entire market.
You're both serving as like the infrastructure layer to like the company's data moat, as well as the product layer in the cases that they want to use. And by being that infrastructure layer, like you allow other vendors to also become even more useful for that company, which makes that company just want you even more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to shift to Glean's tech stack and how you actually deploy your fine-tuned models. Do you guys fine-tune models on a per customer basis, or is there like a generic strategy that you use that is pretty automated?
Yeah, so there's different types of models. So we do not build kind of like foundation models, large scale LLMs. We use the off-the-shelf models from all the largest providers, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera. What we do per customer, though, is train a small language model based upon the customer's data itself. And that model always stays within the customer's environment. So we'll deploy in the cloud in the VPC of the customer. That model sits kind of right there and is owned by the customer. But the real goal of that model is to understand essentially the unique language of the customer. And so if you think about a customer, every company has its own vocabulary, its own sayings. Even departments within have different things that they mean, right? I'm in marketing. If I say PR, I mean press release. If I was an engineer, I'd probably mean pull request.
Yeah.
And so, if somebody is searching for something or asking a question, it's important to understand what that vernacular means within a company, within the context of departments in the company, et cetera. And so that's what those kind of company-specific models are all about. The other thing that we build that's along those lines is our knowledge graph. And that's also just kind of not just, going beyond just a basic search index, but really understanding the people within a company and what their roles are, how they're related, who's in what department, who works for who, but also just like who's collaborating. Like there's a doc, you and I are both collaborating in that document. It's important to both of us. Maybe our roles and our worlds are linked in some way. And so the more you can understand about the context of an organization and how, kind of like not just the data, but how people use the data, it can drive much higher relevancy in terms of bringing the right data to any problem.
Something that we're seeing is that frontier models and foundational models in general are becoming cheaper. And basically these large frontier model players like Anthropic, OpenAI, they're constantly having to deliver better value for their models. Do you see that bubbling up in the application layer as well, where application players have to also provide more competitive pricing?
I think at the end of the day, if you look at our product, the cost of the underlying LLM is actually not a dominant part of the cost. It's actually far more compute power and storage to do the enterprise index, maintain that in real time and all of that. As LLMs have gotten cheaper and cheaper, though, it just opens up more and more usage and more use cases. I'll give you an example. One of the agents we've built is a customer support agent. And basically, when a customer support case comes in, it'll fire off and just start doing all kinds of analysis of that case so that when the actual customer support agent opens up that case, it's like pre-analyzed. We have a guess at what the problem is. We have a suggested resolution, and we've drafted an email that says, here's what we think the problem is. Here's the email that's drafted, review it and hit send. And that was just a ton of work through the LLM before the human, the CSM agent in this case, ever even saw the case. And that might have been something that would have been infeasible to do like a year ago or a year and a half ago. The cost of the LLM might have just trumped the value of that. But we realize now that it was, it's just very cost effective. And so I think what always happens in these cases is as the cost drives down, people think and come up with new ways to use the technology more and drive, better outcomes for it. So I don't find right now that the biggest thing for people is cost optimization of AI. I think we're still largely in the phase where people want the outcome, people want the best results. And all of the AI tools, if you just try to compare them to their benefit, still seem like a pretty darn good deal.
Yeah.
And I think like, OpenAI's, as an example, has raised some eyebrows with some of the pricing of some of their more advanced stuff. But best I can tell, people are paying it because it has value in their lives, right? And so I still think we're by far on the right side of the cost versus value curve for a lot of this stuff.
Awesome. And let's say like at 5 to 10 years from now, I assume integrating with players like you, for example, Glean, is going to be kind of table stakes for companies at that point. I guess, what is your time horizon on workplace search becoming a vendor that you have to have, kind of like needing Slack or needing Salesforce, rather than something that's like an enhancement?
Yeah, I mean, I think this comes back to AI has made the value of a search index of all your data so much more useful. And when Glean was first started, we were an enterprise search company, and we were doing okay, but we weren't lighting the world on fire because at the end of the day, like just using a search index to like find a document I couldn't find or an email I couldn't find has value, but it only has so much more value. But when AI comes around and actually can take advantage of that index to do higher level things and to extract more value, that's where it becomes like super interesting, right? And I think it's there's a way of thinking about Glean and an enterprise search index in general as kind of the next wave of data platforms. If you look at how companies have tried to get value from their business data, there have been several iterations over the decades, but there was the kind of era where people said, we should build a data warehouse and we should put all of our important business data in a data warehouse so analysts can get to it and use it better. Okay, that was good. That allowed kind of like financial analysts and whatnot within the company to use data. Then there was like another era that said, hey, we should build intelligence dashboards on top of the data warehouse. And that will allow people who aren't like super experts in data scientists to be able to understand business data and make database decisions. So if before only like 5% or 2% of the people in the company who could write SQL could get to data, now maybe or 15 or 20% can, right? There's this next wave now where, natural language as an interface to the data of a company just opens up so many more opportunities to that. This is one of the more exciting areas, I think, where we're starting to integrate structured data into the system as well. So now a human in the organization can just ask a question like, how are our sales leads going this quarter? Or, how are sales trending in Japan? And they don't need to necessarily specify that data is in Salesforce or that data is over here. And then the system should be able to understand where's the data, what are the right fields, how do I, take that query and put it in the right system. And so these are the things that are just starting to become available with this technology. But if you think about the opportunity, it's massive because it opens up essentially data-driven insights to everybody that works in the organization who can just, basically ask questions. And so I think we're going to see a new wave of that. And, what that makes clear to folks is there's actually a super high degree of value in going out there and indexing all my data. And basically pre-AI, I could make the index, but I couldn't really do that many useful things with it.
Mhm.
Post-AI, now I can start to really use that index for a whole new set of value.
And it comes back to your point about every employee having access to data and being able to like answer and solve their own problems. Do you see this like distilling into roles also becoming more flexible where the actual individual roles of each employee start to change over time? Like I imagine right now you as a salesperson, you need to work with a data scientist, you need to work with an engineer, but maybe now you don't need access to those people. How do you see that shift happening in the organizations that you're working with now?
I think it's a great insight. I think that it definitely breaks down the walls of specialization.
Mhm.
And I was talking with an engineering leader who uses Glean, and they were talking about how Glean really enables them to think less about having engineers that are just on this team and only know this one area of the code,
Mm.
because the bar is so much lower now to take on new things. And so now we just have engineers in this person's organization that are just great engineers, and they can jump from this project to that project and learn context and figure out how to be productive on a new area of the code in a far shorter amount of time. I think personally, one of the funnest things to watch is actually the new employee onboarding experience, where
Mm.
when you're a new employee, it's hard, right? Like you join a company, you don't want to ask all these dumb questions. You just want to be productive and learn how to do stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so empowering for people to basically not have to feel bad about just typing the dumb questions in and getting the right answer and just learning so fast and becoming productive. And there's always a funny, like within our company, there's always a funny thing to kind of retrain people because they'll come and they'll ask a question and then it's just like, did you glean it? And then they're like, oh, I should have gleaned it, And then before long they realize that, and then it just becomes the first resort of anything. You're just like, well, let me just see if I can figure it out myself first. And so that self-sufficiency dimension is like super liberating for people
Mm.
because it gives you a superpower that you just never had before.
I almost think that like if I had Glean, like I would also shift the way I hire because I would want just like super adaptable people rather than people like data infrastructure engineers versus product engineers because I'd almost think that like they can transition between the two. Used to hire because these people were like very highly knowledgeable in these like areas and like always worked on bringing up data systems or different platforms that they understood. Now it's almost like they can do anything, and so the skill that you're looking for is just different in people.
Yeah, no, I think it's well said, and it just you see this time and time again where people just feel more confident in taking on new stuff because they can learn faster. It's easier to jump into something. They're not starting anything from scratch, and I think that's in general just one of the new ways to learn to work with AI. It's like you should never have to start with a blank sheet of paper anymore for whatever you're doing.
Well, I think that honestly sums up our conversation perfectly of what Glean really enables like the end user to do. Again, almost instills confidence more than just productivity, but like confidence to kind of tackle any problem. This was a great conversation, and I'm super happy we had this. Are there any last things that you would like to say to our listeners?
No, first of all, thanks so much. This has been fun, Maya. And, I think just like maybe going back to the technology transition thing where we started,
Mhm.
more than any other technology transition I've seen in my career, this one is just so profound and it's happening so fast. And so I just really encourage everybody to embrace it and get on board with it. And that light bulb moment of when people really discover how to use AI and push themselves to get over that kind of fear factor or whatever and work differently
Mhm.
is just so awesome to see in people. And so I just really encourage folks to whatever they do, whatever their job they're in, you don't have to wait. Like AI can make it better today. And so just embrace it and dive in.
Cool. Thank you so much. Bye.
Cheers.